Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into turning obstacles upside down, that idea from Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way.
It's such a powerful concept, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's rooted in Stoic philosophy, which I'll admit I always thought was a bit, well, ancient for me.
Yeah, I get that. It can seem a bit intimidating at first.
But then I started reading Holiday's book, and wow, it's amazing how relevant this stuff still is.
The Stoics were dealing with some pretty intense obstacles like exile and war, and their wisdom can definitely help us navigate the chaos of the modern world.
So, for those of us who need a Stoicism refresher, what are the key ideas behind the obstacle is the way?
Well, the core principle is that it's not the obstacles themselves that define us, but how we respond to them.
So it's about shifting our perspective, right?
Exactly. It's about seeing those roadblocks as opportunities for growth, for learning, even for strategic advantage.
Okay, that makes sense in theory, but how does it work in practice? Do you have a favorite example from the book that really brings this to life?
Oh, there's so many great examples. But the story of John D. Rockefeller during the Panic of 1857 always stands out.
Ah, yes, the infamous financial crisis.
Right, and here's Rockefeller, just a young bookkeeper at the time, surrounded by chaos and panic. Everyone's losing their minds, but he's staying calm, observing, taking notes.
Instead of panicking, he sees opportunity.
Exactly. While others are making rash decisions, he's thinking rationally, figuring out how to capitalize on the situation. And guess what? He ends up buying a ton of assets at bargain prices, which becomes the foundation for his future empire.
So it's not just about having a positive attitude, it's about actively looking for the opportunity within the obstacle and then taking action.
Absolutely. And there's another great example from World War II. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, facing the terrifying German Blitzkrieg,
Ugh.
famously said, "The present situation is to be regarded as an opportunity for us and not disaster."
Wow, talk about a bold statement when you're facing down a seemingly unstoppable enemy.
Right. But instead of being paralyzed by fear, Eisenhower analyzes the situation objectively. He sees weaknesses in the enemy's approach, and that allows him to develop counter strategies.
Leading to those crucial Allied victories.
Exactly. Think about the Battle of the Bulge. What could have been a disaster turned into a strategic victory because Eisenhower recognized and exploited the vulnerabilities of the German advance.
It's incredible how this same principle has played out throughout history, from the perseverance of the Union cause during the Civil War to the courage of civil rights leaders facing intense opposition.
It really shows the enduring power of this philosophy. And it's interesting, you see it even today in the fast-paced world of Silicon Valley.
What do you mean?
The whole fail fast, fail often mentality that drives so much innovation. They embrace setbacks as learning opportunities, which allows them to constantly adapt and improve.
That's a great point. Okay, so I can see how this turning obstacles upside down thing worked for people in the past, but our world is so different now. I mean, it's not like I'm facing down an army or navigating a financial panic every day.
You're right, the nature of obstacles has definitely evolved. But in many ways, the obstacles we face today are even more insidious because they're often internal.
Internal, what do you mean?
Think about it, the constant pressure to succeed, the information overload, the feeling of being overwhelmed, all those anxieties and self-doubts we wrestle with, those are the internal obstacles we need to conquer.
So, how do we even begin to apply this turning obstacles upside down approach to those kinds of challenges?
Well, that's where Holiday's framework comes in. He breaks the process down into three key disciplines: perception, action, and will. But honestly, I think the first one, perception, is where the real magic happens.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why is perception so crucial?
Because the way we perceive an obstacle shapes our entire response to it. Think back to Rockefeller. It wasn't the financial panic itself that set him apart, but how he chose to see it.
He saw it as an opportunity while everyone else saw disaster.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective allowed him to stay calm, think clearly, and make those strategic moves that ultimately led to his success.
This is making me think about Amelia Earhart. You know, when she was offered the chance to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, she was told she wouldn't pilot, wouldn't get paid, and might even die. Talk about a terrible deal, right?
Most people would have run for the hills.
But not Earhart. She focused on the bigger picture, the chance to break boundaries and make history, even if the immediate situation was less than ideal.
It's a perfect example of how a shift in perception can open doors to incredible achievements.
It's so inspiring, but how do we actually do that? How do we train ourselves to see things differently when we're in the middle of a difficult situation?
It's definitely a practice, not like a magic switch you flip. But there are some concrete things you can do to cultivate this discipline of perception. Like one technique I find super helpful is practicing objectivity.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? Like, how do you step back and be objective when you're the one stuck in the situation, you know?
Hmm. Well, think about it this way. If a friend was facing the same obstacle, you'd probably give them a more level-headed perspective, right?
Yeah, probably.
You'd be able to see things more clearly because you're not caught up in their emotions. So try to apply that same detachment to your own situation.
Oh, I see. It's like giving advice to yourself, but almost as if you were someone else.
Exactly. It helps remove the emotional baggage so you can see things more rationally. Another technique Holiday talks about is reframing.
Reframing, what does that mean in this context?
Well, remember Eisenhower in the Blitzkrieg?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't deny the danger, but he reframed it as an opportunity. He looked for the weaknesses, those potential advantages that others might miss.
So instead of thinking, this is a disaster, I could say, okay, this is tough, but what can I learn from it? Or how can I use this to my advantage?
You got it. It's all about finding that hidden potential within the obstacle, the unexpected benefit that you might not see at first glance.
I can see how powerful that could be, like reframing that initial panic into something more productive. But even with the best mindset, sometimes you still have to take action, right? I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road.
You're absolutely right. Perception is the foundation, but action is the fuel. It's the antidote to that fear and uncertainty, the procrastination.
This is reminding me of Amelia Earhart again. She didn't just sit around waiting for the perfect opportunity. She took action, accepting that risky transatlantic flight. I mean, that was a bold move.
It really was. And think about Ulysses S. Grant during the Civil War, his campaign to capture Vicksburg.
Oh, right, with all those setbacks.
Exactly. It was full of them,
Yeah.
but he never gave up. He
Ah.
just kept experimenting, adapting to the situation until he finally achieved victory.
That kind of persistence is incredible, but honestly, I think I'd get discouraged way too easily. How do you stay motivated when things get tough?
Well, that's where the third discipline comes in, where it
Yeah.
was about tapping into that inner strength, that resilience that helps you weather the storms.
It sounds almost superhuman, though. Like, how do you even begin to cultivate that kind of spirit?
It's not about being some emotionless robot. It's more about developing the ability to experience those emotions without being controlled by them. The Stoics had this saying, ta ephemen, ta uk ephemen.
What's that mean?
What is up to us? What is not up to us? It's about recognizing that some things are within our control and some things just aren't.
So you're saying we should focus our energy on what we can control, even in those really challenging circumstances.
That's the key. And a perfect example of this is the story of baseball pitcher Tommy John.
Oh, yeah. What happened to him? I can't remember.
Well, he suffered a career-ending injury, a torn ligament in his pitching elbow. Back then, that was basically a death sentence for a pitcher's career.
I can only imagine how devastated he must have been.
Absolutely. But instead of giving up, he found a doctor who was willing to try this experimental surgery. I mean, the odds were slim, but he was determined, put in the grueling rehab and the mental effort, and he came back stronger than ever.
Wow. So he actually returned to baseball after that.
Not only did he return, but he played for another 13 seasons.
No way.
Yep. And get this. Years later, his young son had this terrible fall, nearly died. Again, John was facing a situation where most people would just lost all hope, but he and his family, they stayed strong, focusing on what they could control. Their love, their support, their belief in their son's recovery.
That's a powerful story, and it really shows the power of that mindset, that focusing on what you can control.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's inspiring.
It is, right.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even in the darkest moments, we always have choices. We can choose to give in to despair, or we can choose to focus on what we can do, what we can influence.
Okay, so we've talked about perception, action, and will. It's clear that they're all connected, but how do we actually cultivate this discipline of will in our daily lives? It still feels a little bit, well, intangible.
I get that. It can be tricky at first. One technique Holiday recommends is actually something called negative visualization.
Wait, negative visualization, isn't the whole point of this to be more positive?
Right, so it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's not about being pessimistic. It's more about mental preparation.
Mental preparation.
Yeah, like imagine the worst case scenarios, not to dwell on them, but to like reduce your fear and actually plan how you'd handle those situations.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a fire drill for your emotions. You're rehearsing for those tough moments so you don't just panic when they actually happen.
Exactly. You're preparing yourself to respond effectively instead of just reacting impulsively.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Another practical tip is to break down those big, overwhelming obstacles into smaller, more manageable steps.
Right, so instead of staring down this huge mountain of a problem, I can just focus on putting one foot in front of the other.
That's the idea. It makes the task less daunting and gives you that sense of progress as you complete each step. Like there's this story about a young man who felt overwhelmed by learning to read.
Yeah.
He thought it was just impossible.
I think I've heard this one. Didn't he meet someone who gave him some really good advice?
Yeah. He met Henry Clay, the
Hmm?
famous orator, and Clay pointed to the letter A on a poster and said, "You see that boy? That's an A. Now you only have 25 more letters to go."
Simple but effective, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
Such a powerful way to break down a huge obstacle into smaller, achievable goals.
It completely changes your whole perspective. Instead of feeling defeated, you feel empowered to take action.
And one more thing that's super important for cultivating that will, having a strong sense of purpose, knowing your why, what motivates you, what your values are.
So it's about having something bigger than yourself to strive for.
You got it. When you have that clear sense of purpose, those obstacles, they become less about you and more about that mission you're trying to accomplish.
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I'm asking, how can I use this experience to actually get closer to my goals?
Exactly. It's about reframing obstacles, not as personal attacks, but as challenges to overcome. Tests of your character, your commitment to your purpose.
This is so insightful. I mean, I'm starting to realize I have way more control over my responses to obstacles than I thought.
And remember, it's a practice. It takes time and effort, but the payoff is huge.
Okay, so we've covered perception, action, and will. We've explored how to shift our perspective, take decisive action, and cultivate that uh, unshakable inner strength. But how do we actually tie all of this together? Like how do we apply these principles in our day-to-day lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's where we move from, like, the theory to the actual practice.
Mhm.
One of the key takeaways from Holiday's book is that turning obstacles upside down, it's not a one-time event. It's a way of life.
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
Exactly. It's a mindset that allows you to navigate those inevitable challenges
Hmm.
with resilience, creativity, and even, a sense of gratitude.
Wait, gratitude for obstacles. That seems a little, well, counterintuitive.
It might seem strange at first, but when you really embrace this philosophy, you start to see obstacles not as roadblocks, but as opportunities.
Opportunities for growth and learning. So
Exactly.
you're recognizing that even though challenges can be tough, they also push us to grow, to
Yeah.
develop new skills, to discover strengths we didn't even know we had.
You got it. And that can actually lead to a genuine sense of gratitude for the experience, even if it was difficult or painful at the time.
So it's not about pretending obstacles are fun or easy, but about recognizing the potential benefits, the lessons learned, the growth that comes from overcoming them.
Right. It's about acknowledging the reality of the situation while choosing to focus on what you can control, what you can learn, how you can use that experience to your advantage.
This has been so helpful, and I feel like I'm already starting to shift my own thinking about obstacles. But I know our listeners are eager to hear more about, like, the specifics, how to apply this philosophy in their own lives.
And they're in luck. In the final part of our deep dives, we're going to explore specific examples of how to turn obstacles upside down in all sorts of situations,
Right.
from dealing with difficult people to overcoming creative blocks.
Okay, so I'm ready to get practical here. We've talked about these big ideas, but now I want to know how to actually use this turning obstacles upside down stuff in my everyday life.
Let's get into it. So one of the most common obstacles everyone faces is dealing with difficult people.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. It's like there's always someone, a demanding boss, a gossipy coworker, a negative family member, those energy vampires who just, throw obstacles in your path.
Ugh, yes, I know exactly what you mean. Do you have a stoic solution for that? Because I am all ears.
Well, remember, you can't control other people's behavior, but you can control how you react to them. And the Stoics, they actually saw these difficult people as opportunities for practice.
Wait, really? Opportunities? How so?
Think of it like mental strength training.
Oh, okay.
Dealing with those difficult people, it challenges you to develop patience, empathy, resilience, all those valuable skills you need no matter what you do in life.
So instead of getting sucked into their negativity, I can try to see it as a chance to, like, build up my own emotional fitness.
Exactly. It doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, though, right?
Right.
You still set boundaries, communicate effectively, but you're doing it from a place of inner strength, not reacting out of anger or frustration.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about another obstacle we all face, those creative blocks? When the ideas just won't come.
Uh, it's the worst.
It's so frustrating. But those creative blocks are totally normal, and instead of seeing them as failures, what if you reframe them as opportunity?
Opportunities for what? To explore, to experiment. What if that block is actually a signal that it's time to shake things up a bit?
Interesting. So, what are some ways to shake things up when you're feeling stuck?
Well, sometimes a simple change of scenery can work wonders. Go for a walk, work in a different room, or even just listen to different music. Breaking those routines can really help spark fresh ideas.
It's amazing how much our environment affects our thinking.
Right. And another thing to try is exposing yourself to, like new influences. Read books outside your usual genres. Watch films from different cultures. Talk to people with different perspectives. It's like feeding your creative mind with all these new inputs.
I love that. It's like cross training for your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes those creative blocks, they're just a sign that you need to, rest,
Yeah.
recharge.
Well, yeah.
Give yourself permission to step away, take a break, let your subconscious do its thing.
Like that saying, a change is as good as a rest.
Right.
Oh.
Just trust the creative process. You'll find that inspiration often returns when you least expect it.
This has been so helpful. I'm seriously looking at obstacles in a whole new light. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just remember that turning obstacles upside down, it's not about like achieving some perfect state of stoic detachment.
Right.
You're still going to experience those emotions, but you're learning to manage them, so they don't control you.
It's like being the captain of your own ship, even when the seas get rough.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it takes practice. It's a lifelong journey, but it's about learning to navigate all those ups and downs with, well, with grace and courage and a sense of purpose.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners, here's something to think about. The next time you encounter an obstacle, take a moment to pause, breathe, and ask yourself, how can I turn this upside down? How can I use this experience to, learn, to grow, to become stronger, more resilient? The answers might surprise you.
It really is amazing what we can achieve when we shift our perspective and embrace those obstacles, see them as opportunities.
This has been such an inspiring deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep turning those obstacles upside down.